You know, it just hit me. I never did a retrospective video on any of the Spider-Man movies. I did one for the games, a few years ago actually. You can check the link down in the description. But never one for the movies. And with No Way Home coming out in a couple of months, maybe now's a great time to do it. So, I think it's time. There are so many movies to cover as far as this. In fact, especially if you want to get into the stuff with the MCU Spider-Man, there's this much. And I kind of figured if I'm going to do this, I should probably focus on a series at a time. Now, I'm not doing this because I believe that Toby Maguire and Andrew Garfield are coming back from No Way Home. If that happens, that's great. But I kind of feel like the internet's hyping that up as it is. I'm just doing this because I love Spider-Man. I kind of want to just talk about Spider-Man movies. But I figured that's still going to be enough to get me into the hype train. So why don't we start off with a lot of people's beginning, including my own, the original Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Now, obviously, this goes without saying. This is a classic trilogy. A lot of people, including myself, grew up with this. This trilogy showed up when I was like 8. I was really young. And I was into Spider-Man beforehand, but obviously these movies got me super excited. This trilogy is not perfect. We'll talk about the third one, but it's still a pretty damn great trilogy. But I figured let's just kind of break them apart and do each movie at a time. And I'm also going to try and do something here. Like, obviously, Spider-Man 3 is not great. I know there's some apologists out there. I'm not one of them. Spider-Man 3 is not good. But I'm still going to try and, find what I like about that movie. There's probably a couple of things, I'm sure. But we're not focusing on that. We're focusing first on Spider-Man 1. Now, what to begin with the first Spider-Man? First off, okay, you know what? I'm a cosplayer, so let's start with the suit, huh? The suit's classic. It's beautiful. When I first saw that was a great suit. It was a great, nice little, I guess you could say, modernization. But it has this classic feel to it. You know what I mean? Like, it does certain things, but it really tries to stick with its, comic book looks. The difference is there's the raised webbing, the eyes, the more realistic spider in the background, but still this classic air to it. I believe one of the main reasons for the raised webbing was because it was easier for it to read on cameras at the time. And honestly, it's a great look. It's really hard to beat it. That being said, I'm not saying it's my favorite suit. I love a lot of Spider-Man suits, but it definitely is one of my favorites for sure. It's classic. You really can't get more classic than that. Although I will also say, I know a lot of people don't tend to agree on this, but I honestly don't hate the Goblin Suit either. I know a lot of people mention in the past, like, oh, it doesn't look comic accurate. He looks like a Power Rangers villain. But, I don't know, rewatching that movie, it kind of fits for, like, what they're going for. I'm not saying they're trying to make it, like, hyper, like, realistic or anything. This movie clearly has this staging to it. But as far as what the Goblin formula was initially used for, it kind of makes sense that the suit looks more like kind of a tactical suit. Instead of, no offense, drapes and like a weird goblin mask. I know they almost did. There's like a few looks at what almost was going to be that, but ultimately they didn't go for that. Similar to how they ultimately didn't go for mechanical web shooters for Toby Maguire, and instead went for the organics. But now going past the suits and just talking about Toby Maguire, let's talk about Toby Maguire. His version of Peter Parker is I love it. It's a very stereotypical nerd. Like geek. Nobody likes him for some reason, which is kind of funny. Like nobody, like almost nobody. Like even the people that look like other stereotypical nerds, just not into the guy. You see it like straight up. And I know it's kind of just to hammer in that like this guy's that kind of geek. But it's just I kind of find that funny. Obviously, it's very stylized as far as the idea of like. As far as a kind of nerd type, but it just was it almost read interesting, especially considering the fact that this movie starts with Peter in high school, senior year and everything. Even though Tobey Maguire does not look like a kid in high school, I'll tell you that much, and it always becomes more apparent as the years go by. But and again, no offense, but yeah, I don't really read any of these people as high school kids. None of them. I mean, hell, look at James Franco looking like a dad with these glasses when he's, I guess, doing homework or something in that scene. I don't know, but he looks like a dad looking at a newspaper. And going into James Franco and Kirsten Dunst and everything like that, they all do very well play their parts. Especially, obviously, the two big stars here are Willem Dafoe and why am I forgetting his name? I'm just gonna say J. Jonah Jameson. His name is definitely not J. Jonah Jameson. What is his name? Whose name is J.K. Simmons. Like, I even just looked it up to make sure I didn't forget, but for some reason, his mind, it just immediately goes to J. Jonah Jameson. And Willem Dafoe is Norman Osborn. I think they both really they really brought that movie home for me. Like, Toby Maguire as well, I thought he was a great Peter, but those two just knocked it out of the park. Perfect Jameson. He's so perfect that they literally have him cast again as Jameson for the MCU. So, that tells you something right there. The other thing too, and I this is the intro to it, and I'll keep bringing it up with each movie. I don't know how how friendships work in this series. Like I know like the whole thing is like Peter doesn't really have friends, so he just kind of has Harry. But, whew, boy, I would not want Harry as a friend, man. It's just like it's more of kind of a fun thing to point out with the first two movies, but it's really a thing to talk about in the third one. So it's just a funny joke. Not how friends would be. That's odd, but it's still fun to watch. I figured the last thing I'll talk about with this movie are my two favorite scenes. My first one is the death of Uncle Ben. I believe the whole thing with Uncle Ben, masterfully done. To the great power comes great responsibility, to his unfortunate demise, and then just that visceral feeling of looking at Toby Maguire, of looking at and that's that visceral feeling of looking at Peter just go seeking just straight vengeance. I thought that was just really cool and well done, and definitely again brings home that like it was essentially his cause that ended up what happened. This kind of karmic, this kind of karma that he has to deal with, and understanding that he needs to be responsible with his powers. I just thought that was incredibly well done. And, it really is going to be hard. It really is hard to top that version of Uncle Ben. Well, the other favorite scene of this is the final fight between Green Goblin and Spider-Man. Specifically in the abandoned building. It just feels so incredibly brutal. Like, this entire movie, almost to a fault, actually kind of to a fault, is very stylized and staged. Like, it doesn't necessarily give me the feeling of New York City. It just kind of like it kind of is a stage thing, especially like the fight during Times Square. But that scene just felt so hard, like Peter just getting his ass kicked, Goblin really going for it. He's fighting for his life. The bomb going off in his face and his suit just being mangled, just really well done. I remember as a kid I was annoyed by that because I love the suit so much that I was like, why'd you ruin the suit? But especially re-looking at it now, well done. Such a great scene. But yeah, obviously critiques, as I was mentioning, this is very of its age. And when it comes to me, I always tend to notice things like kind of lighting, cinematography, and stuff like that. And as far as the first one, it's very early 2000s. The lighting is kind of base, like a lot of movies you see at that time. A lot of New York feels very, very staged. It doesn't exactly feel entirely like a real city to me, despite the fact that obviously it's in New York City. It feels kind of staged, and that's kind of my issue there. Like, I honestly don't think I have too many issues with this movie, to be honest, but it's just that kind of how it really just feels of its time. And there are movies that are like that. Batman 89 very much feels like it's 89, versus the sequel for that one, and in this one, like, Batman Returns and Spider-Man 2, in my opinion, feel incredibly timeless. But we'll get into that in a moment. So in a way, it does feel like it hurts the movie a little bit. Obviously, the CGI has aged the way it's gonna age. It's a 2002 movie after all, and that's kind of my main gripe with it. It's nothing really too major, but it's a good Spider-Man movie. It's a great Spider-Man movie, but better Spider-Man movies have come out since then. And that is a great segue into Spider-Man 2. A great Spider-Man movie. Definitely the pinnacle of the trilogy. And still, like, one of the best Spider-Man movies out there. It definitely hits my top 3. It kind of fights in place. It depends on my mood. I'll get into my top 3 later, but it's in my top 3. Spider-Man 2 is it's excellent. Doc Ock is definitely my favorite live-action villain. And yeah, I was going to say one of, but no, he's definitely my favorite live-action villain. He's just so well done. Alfred Molina did an excellent job. The look of him is fantastic. I love his moral complication, his moral dilemma. Obviously, a lot of versions of Doc Ock doesn't exactly have that complication to him. I guess this Insomniac Spider-Man's Doc Ock kind of has that complication in that he has a very deep relationship with Peter. But even then, he's still not as morally grounded as this one. This Octavius really wanted to make perpetual energy, and then basically later on, his arms, they start controlling him at a certain point, really like accentuate him still wanting to do that. Like, oh, it should have worked. It couldn't have failed. I'm gonna do it again. It's basically his hubris is the thing that kind of makes him do criminal things, and also hyper intelligent arms. Where in the movie he had like this chip in the front that got short circuited, so these hyper intelligent arms also kind of controlling him and doing whatever they want. Also, one of the greatest like kind of horror-esque origin scenes in like the hospital with all the doctors and nurses pretty much getting just completely murdered by these arms. Really scary and well done. Absolutely excellent. Definitely. That one also goes into my favorite scene category of this movie. But I'm going ahead of myself here. Now I'm going into Toby Maguire as Spider-Man. I very much love his character arc in this because he seems so downtrodden, and not like just from all the jokey stuff that we mentioned that for some reason nobody likes him, but like Spider-Man feels like such a full-time job to him that he barely has time to hold a regular job or to go to school, and it hurts his relationships with his friends and his Aunt May, and you really feel that. He just feels like he's just like broken inside mentally. He's just like he can't really do this, and it's really getting to him to a point where obviously his powers start to kind of degrade and go away. And we don't really see this again until Far From Home with Tom Holland's Spider-Man's spider sense, but we'll get into that in that movie. But it was just that incredible arc of his that he really just has this hard time, and it affects him and affects the people around him. Again, the great joke, I don't know how people think these people are friends, because every time Harry shows up, it's, hey Peter, how's it going? Now who's Spider-Man? And all leading up to the fact that to a gala where he slaps him constantly after 3 entire bottles of champagne, and just cruel. It's just kind of cruel. This Harry, and actually the next Harry, is just mean. It's just mean. But again, it fits into the theme of like Peter being downtrodden. Speaking of that, also Mary Jane, who fell in love, who eventually does love Peter, also gets into this relationship, kind of like in a way of a desperation. Like she doesn't want to be alone. Maybe spites Peter a little bit. I'm not entirely sure. Not that I'm not entirely sure. Of course I'm sure. But it's complicated in that. And it, again, hurts Peter very much. But it's, again, a little funny because there is a point where she says, my best friend who cares so much about me, referring to Peter. And I'm like, you guys were not friends in the first one. You kind of barely knew he existed in high school. And you were kind of friends after. But that was but I wouldn't say that's best friend category. But I digress. It's still, again, I'm just pointing it out as funny. It's not really a critique. I just found it funny. But yeah, generally speaking, it's just such a great movie. Again, I feel like the cinematography has gotten a lot better too, and as well as the lighting, you feel like stronger shadows. New York City just genuinely feels like New York City, and obviously they don't always film in New York City. You can tell like there are a few areas where it's like obviously like a stage that they've often used for cityscapes, but it just still feels like a genuine city. It genuinely feels like New York City to me. It's in some ways I can't even explain it, but that's kind of how I feel. So, and I mentioned one of my most favorite scenes being Doc Ock's birth, essentially, and I'd say the other one would probably be the conversation between Aunt May and Peter. I know it's kind of funny. I don't really talk about like the fight scenes or anything like that with Spider-Man, and they're all great. Don't get me wrong, but the ones that really made me feel something is when things are silent and Peter finally admits his guilt with Uncle Ben to Aunt May, and Aunt May, instead of really lashing out or reacting harshly, she goes upstairs to just kind of deal with it. And there's just something emotional about that. Very, very intense. And I thought that was just well done. Oh, I also watched both versions of Spider-Man 2. I saw Spider-Man 2 and 2.1. And I have a complicated relationship when it comes to director's cuts. Sometimes I do very much love them, but I can't help but feel that a lot of times when it comes to director's cuts, pacing does suffer a little bit. And I don't think it's that, and I would say it's no different to Spider-Man 2.1, but I still think I still had fun watching it. I'm not gonna lie to you. There are some things I don't think needed to be there, like the pizza the scene in the pizza shop was a little longer, and I thought like it didn't need to be longer. Pizza time is great. Actually, I feel like I feel like I have a modern version of Peter's bike that he has in this trilogy. Like, you can see back there, I have like this e-bike. I should do a cosplay with that. I should do like a modernized Pizza Time cosplay, maybe with Miles. That'd be a good idea. Really, this is the pinnacle of the Spider-Man trilogy. And if I'm honest with you, if you want, you can just stop there. Like, the issue with a decent amount of trilogies, like, one movie is going to end up being bad. Fairly often, it tends to be the third one. And sometimes it either affects people's opinions of the trilogy in general, or sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't with this trilogy, but to me, I don't ever really have to watch Spider-Man 3. I kind of mostly did it for this video, and that's kind of it. Spider-Man 3 is just not great. I'll get into it, and I promised I was going to say about the stuff I liked first before really getting into my critiques of Spider-Man 3. So, yeah, as promised, here we go. What did I like about Spider-Man 3? Well, first of all, I like Sandman's character. Again, I like that they went for a more complicated route like they did with Doc Ock. Even though there's a particular thing that is part of his character in this movie that I am not a fan of, and I will get into that, but I think his character generally is pretty good. I do like the black suit. It's fairly simplistic. I've liked designs better, but it's still a pretty good design. I even like the design of Venom. And that's kind of the only thing I like about this version of Venom. But the suit, really cool. I do like kind of like the look of Venom when he's fully Venom and not taking off his mask all the time. What else did I... And as far as scenes that I like, there's nothing really... I don't have like any like big scenes that I connected with in this one. But I will tell you the two scenes I did like in Spider-Man 3 are the two scenes where Peter hands Harry his ass. Essentially. Like... the first time Peter fights with Harry, where somehow Harry does not register the fact that his dad was Green Goblin and murdered a lot of people, but is still going to be big mad at Peter and try and kill him using the Green Goblin stuff, but with this weird look. I don't know, why did they do like a hobgoblin thing for that? Why did they do this weird... I don't even, like, what was he called? I think they called him the New Goblin? They even look like a goblin. Like, at least the other one, while it had like a mech suit, had like a goblin helmet, you know? But this one it just looked like he looked like a kind of a snowboarder. But, it's, you know, it's, costumes is costumes. Essentially, what I was saying is that I love these scenes because it really shows that Peter is kind of a pro at this by now. He's like, you know, he's been Spider-Man for years now. So obviously when a dude with the same goblin powers as their dad shows up, he can pretty easily take him down, and to a point where he just gets convenient amnesia. And the second time, I don't even think he really needed the black suit for the second time, but he really just beat the absolute shit out of Harry. It was pretty great to look at. I'm not gonna lie, that was pretty funny. I like that a lot. Now, getting into what I don't like, which is a lot. The thing that I thought was very interesting when I rewatched this was that it really is trying to attempt to bring home the idea that these guys are friends. I find that ironic because this is the worst example I have seen of these people being friends. All right? Beyond the fact that Harry's trying to kill Peter. But let's get into the fact that Peter is just conveniently lets go of the fact that his friend has amnesia and just kind of plays face. Doesn't admit anything, just kind of lets that go entirely. You got MJ kind of down on her luck on one end, and it clearly affects the relationship between her and Peter to a point where do these people really love each other? I don't know, man. These people, like, they seem to be mad at each other more often than not, and despite any successes. But even into success, for some reason, Peter finds it completely okay to randomly kiss a woman as Spider-Man in front of, like, a bunch of people, especially MJ. Why would you think that's okay? Especially when you want to marry her. And then MJ, later on, goes to Harry to kind of, like, go off steam and shit, and kisses Harry. Like, it's just a kiss extravaganza for people that aren't your partners. It's wild to me. And also, I don't know why MJ and Peter still hold secrets to each other. Like, that's not how relationships work. Like, why would you not tell MJ that the reason why things are weird between you and Harry is like, Harry thinks I killed his dad. Did you? No, I did not. Okay, how do we do this? Or with MJ losing her role, like, that's kind of sad. I don't want to be there for, if Jen had something going on, I would hope she would let me know. Actually, I think she would, because I would be there for her. You know what I mean? And I get, like, the whole thing is that Peter's a little bit up his own ass because, now people like Spider-Man for once. But I just found that really funny. Like, and then, like, just the sudden, and then this whole sudden thing at the end after everything, Harry gets this exposition from his butler, who somehow knew that about Norman and how he died, and yet kept that information to himself for years, letting Harry go down this insane rabbit hole of wanting to kill Spider-Man, and then Peter realizing that, and this just lets it go until it's convenient. I don't get that. I don't understand. So that's how I feel about that. Why don't I get into villains? Because there's three. There's Sandman, Venom, and emo Peter Parker. Oh, four. I'm sorry. I forgot about Harry, but I complained about him for the last 10 minutes. Let me go into one of the cruxes of this. Sandman. So, as I mentioned, I do like him as a character, but my biggest issue with this is that in this movie, it turns out he was the one that killed Uncle Ben. And I hate that. I hate that because that completely destroys, like, kind of the big thing that happened in the first movie. Like, Peter's whole, idea with responsibility and the fact that it was his fault that Uncle Ben died. Turns out it kind of wasn't. It was Sandman. It was this guy, Flint Marko. He was the one that was putting him at gunpoint and accidentally shot him. Obviously, throughout the movie, it depends. I guess you could read it that it's still the other guy's fault because he kind of spooked Flint, but he still held the gun to an old man while this dude was talking to him. I don't know. That really kills it for me. Because, no, it was the other guy that killed Uncle Ben. You lose that. You lose so much. Like, I don't know, man. It could have been so many other things. The black suit could just make Peter angry. He doesn't need to have, this entire crux. Personally, he could be just angry that this dude's out there. I don't know. I get, in a sense, why they did it as far as this movie, but it kind of lessens other movies because of that. I'm not a fan of that. I think that's bad. But anyway, so that's my issue with Flint Marko out of the way. The whole thing with the Uncle Ben killing and whatnot. Actually, leading from that into Peter Parker in the black suit, I don't understand why they decided to do that haircut. You know what I mean? Like, it just feels... there's a reason why the internet calls him emo Peter Parker, because that's what he looks like for some reason. Like, bad boy means he has to have, the hair over one of his eyes. I don't know, man. I don't know. That doesn't scream edgy to me. And then it's just, and obviously, this movie's the one that's filled with the memes. More often than not, if you see a meme from the Spider-Man trilogy, it's from Spider-Man 3. Actually, it's basically like how people look at the Star Wars prequels. Those prequels are all just meme fodder. So it kind of feels like Spider-Man 3 is kind of like that. It's just meme fodder. There's emo Peter dancing, emo Peter in general. My friends and I actually have our own personal meme with Jameson. There's a scene where he says, "What are you waiting for? Chinese New Year?" And we kind of use that sometimes. And that's just a personal meme for us, But it's kind of interesting that I tend to remember more Spider-Man 3 as far as memes, but not exactly as far as a strong Spider-Man story. But yeah, so this thing makes him more violent and also kind of a dick. He's just a dick. That's it. It's not even just aggression. He's just kind of a douchebag. To a point where after recently breaking up with MJ, he goes to the club where she now works with Gwen to make MJ jealous. There's a fight that happens, and then he purposefully, accidentally slaps MJ upside the head to the ground. I'm like, that's great. Domestic abuse in the middle of all this douchebaggery. I know it's to show I'm bad, but I don't know. There's just so many ways that it could have been done. I know the big crux is that Sam Raimi did not want to do Venom. He was not interested in it, but he was kind of forced to. And that's kind of why it feels so uneven. And, it doesn't feel very strong. And then this leads to the other recipient of the symbiote, Eddie Brock, or this version of Eddie Brock. No, this is no offense to Topher Grace or anything like that. I'm sure he did the best that he could. It's just that his version of Eddie Brock is awful, as well as Venom. Like, Eddie Brock is like how he is in the Venom movies. And, people have varying opinions on the first one. I personally love it. I know it's a bad movie, but it's fun. And mainly because you could tell everyone had fun making it. And Let There Be Carnage, I do think is a much better movie. And you could tell they even have more fun in that one. It's more of the understanding that Eddie Brock does genuinely try and want to do the good thing. It's just his good thing is a little bit complicated. But Venom is more anti-hero than a true villain, at least in like the main continuity in the comic books. Ultimate Spider-Man's a little different, but as far as main continuity, that's kind of what he is. This movie, he's just a complete douchebag. He's just a jerk all around. He's trying to like get a job in the Daily Bugle. Literally photoshops a picture of Spider-Man to pretend that he's a bad guy, but then suddenly begs Peter to not tell anybody if nobody would hire me. No other paper would hire me. This is all I have. No wonder they wouldn't hire you, you dick! You stole his picture! Honestly, Peter could have the grounds to sue you! You stole his picture and photoshopped it. You jackass. You don't deserve anything. You got embarrassed? You embarrassed yourself, my guy. Oh, you remember when you humiliated me, Peter? Nah, homie, you humiliated yourself. Gwen didn't like you. Nobody likes you. Genuinely. You're a jerk. And then in the Venom suit is, again, I do kind of like the suit design. What I don't like is more often than not, you don't really see like the face of Venom for very long. Most of the time, for some reason, Eddie Brock just puts the symbiote back so you can see his face. And I don't know why that irks me so much, but it just does, man. I'd rather see more Venom, not Topher Grace. Sorry, dude. It's just, I'd rather see that. Like, you can talk clearly with the Venom mask. Like, just use that. I don't need to see your face all the time, bro. It's just very much not strong. Also, this is the only one in the trilogy that doesn't do, like, the final swing. You know what I mean? And I kind of feel like that's telling. And it's just, this is not a strong Spider-Man movie. I don't know if it's the worst. I guess I'll find out when I watch the Amazing Spider-Man movies. But it's just not great. There are obviously things that make me angry about it. There are things that I do like about it, sure, but it's just not a great one. I do hear, pray tell, there is an editor's cut, which I think is on Amazon or something like that. But you gotta rent it, and I didn't want to spend money on a movie I still probably not like that much. But I do hear it's very superior. So, I don't know. If you guys think I should check that one out, let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll see this supposedly better version of Spider-Man 3. But generally speaking, I just don't think... it wasn't worth it. I just don't think it's a great movie. I think it's unfortunately, a sad way this trilogy ends. Because I kind of feel like it was just a mess of situations going on. It just, I don't think it was ever going to end up being strong given what everything that the actors or the director had to do for it. So, and I just think that's kind of unfortunate, But I'm glad Sam Raimi's coming back into the superhero world with Doctor Strange. I'll tell you that much. But yeah, definitely out of these, the best one is for sure Spider-Man 2, and it's still one of the best superhero movies as well as one of the best Spider-Man movies. But in any event, that's kind of how I feel about these movies. It's a classic trilogy. This is, hits with nostalgia and whatnot. And I can't say I can't recommend them. Although, like I said, if you're really feeling all three, go for it. But if you want to really kind of capture the best of the best, just watch the first two. You know what I mean? Spider-Man 3, that never really felt worth it to me. Those are my thoughts on the original Spider-Man trilogy. If you want, let me know your thoughts in the comments about this series. Are these your favorites? Are these not your favorites? What do you love about them? What do you not like about them? I'd love to hear your thoughts because you spent like the last 20 or so minutes listening to me. But I think we're going to end this little part of the retrospective here. Obviously, next time we'll talk about the Amazing Spider-Man duology, and we can go into that. I can already tell you I have a lot of opinions, but I won't get into them until that video. So for now, I hope you guys have an amazing day. You see what I did there? I know. I am amazingly hilarious. But I hope you guys have a good one. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.